Before I hand over to the next speaker, the other question that I lay before you for the discussion period, AUKUS is all about deterrence. And if it is deterrence, then it is about relative deterrence. But the plan here is to build the submarines over a period of 20 years. So if it takes 20 years to build the X number of submarines that is in the contract, what will be the change of relative deterrence of the power for which it is intended? Because we have already seen last week that China has tested a hypersonic missile, which has grossly alarmed the Americans and the West. So over a 20 years period, whether the deterrence that is intended can be achieved or not, that is a very big question I lay before you. So there are a lot of unanswered questions here. And you are the best judges to answer those questions when we come back to you for the discussion session. With that, then our next speaker is going to be Pervez Karim Abbasi from the East West University.
Thank you, sir. So I'm Pervez Karim Abbasi. But I would like to share that I'm feeling a bit jittery because after 3 titans in a row and a very elegant man of letters introducing us, I feel that I would not be up to the task. Let me give you a brief outline of how I'm going to present. A teacher never forgets his tricks. Number 1, what is the geoeconomic rationale for AUKUS? So that's number 1. Number 2, how is it going to impact ASEAN, trade, economy-wise? Number 3, what would be the future trends in terms of the coming conflict / cooperation / strategic ambiguity between China and US? And the 4th question, which is on everyone's mind, how is it going to impact Bangladesh? So these are the 4 things we'll try to send out, 2.5 minutes. First and foremost, a lot has been said about US-Chinese strategic competition. In my mind, it's almost similar to the rise of Germany before First World War, when there were group formations, right? So you had the Entente Cordiale and you had the Triple Alliance. And again, this was also a case of deterrence building. So what we have right now in AUKUS is a case of sub-regional bloc formation. Regional, that's Quad. But AUKUS is a more flexible approach. It is not, what would I say, a knee-jerk reaction. Why so? Let me elaborate. What was the timing of AUKUS? Just probably 2 weeks after American withdrawal from Afghanistan. So this was also a strategic messaging also. Yes, negotiations were taking place for several months, but this was actually an expression of intent of America's recalibration of its policies. Because American policymakers had realized in Afghanistan, well, the Afghan populace, nobody asked, but that's another issue, is that why are we providing security over here? Because again, which are the countries which will benefit by American involvement in Afghanistan? Iran, China, Russia to a certain extent, and of course, you also have Pakistan. Again, American withdrawal from this has created, and this is my opinion, and as we can see over here, a lot of chaos. And even Pakistani experts are saying that Afghanistan is close to the brink of collapse. That's one. But that has also resulted in a loss of face for America. So what has happened? It is signaling that it is going into Indo-Pacific to re-exert its hegemony, which has been under challenge or criticism, and to reassure its allies. America's association with Indo-Pacific is not new. Remember Hawaii? Remember Guam? Remember Diego Garcia? America has always been an active player in Indo-Pacific. But along with this, you have China, which exerts its historical sphere of influence. And that brings us with Australia. What about Australia? Now, if you recall that Australia has been in the midst of an ever-increasing spat with China, It had carried out legislation whereby it had criticized, again, foreign interference in domestic politics. And also it has targeted nationals, mainly from China, in terms of acting as saboteurs or as spies. China was very critical. What we had over there was unofficial sanctions on Australian export of coal, LNG, barley, and rare earth materials. Australia has estimated to lose about 6.6 to 12.2 billion Australian dollars. China has not imposed sanctions, unofficial ones. Australia was in need of greater security. Yes, it is ironic that Australia was dependent on China for its robust growth. But then, when again the Chinese were showing increased sensitivity to criticism, this was when Australia moved out. So, what did we see? They again abandoned the deal that they had come up with the French government, especially to the Naval Group, where the French government has a large stake over there. And I believe they were about in the process of importing 12 short-fin Barracuda submarines, the diesel ones. And what have they moved on to? Now, primarily, the submarines that have it's already talked about very elegantly over here. Usually, it's either the Astute class from Britain or the Virginia class of submarines, nuclear submarines from USA. And where will be the central staging location? HMS Sterling, which is located in Perth, the naval base. And this is going to give them greater depth and greater duration. And this is one reason why Australia has welcomed this kind of maritime protection. And Chinese Navy, the plans, their ever-expanding footprint has also threatened and intimidated many of the ASEAN members. And of course, we are talking about quantum sharing, quantum computing. We are talking about cybersecurity, technology sharing. So it is a very holistic platform. That is for Australia's case. And remember, the military, industrial, and technological complex that we have, several billions of, each of the submarine costs about several billions of dollars to construct. So this will be a windfall gain. That, along with this, that takes us to the ASEAN angle of this. Southeast Asia and East Asia has its share of troubles with China because China was historically a predominant power. Japan, with Japan, you have what's in the name of an island. Senkaku Islands, according to the Japanese, or Daewoo Islands in terms of basically the Chinese. In terms of South China Sea, again, the 9-dash line, and again, the allegations of many of the Southeast Asian nations about the Chinese actually going for terraforming over here, artificially constructing islands and building militias. I'm just mentioning two sides. I have no side to pick over here. Apart from this, you also had the recent row with South Korea in terms of the third missile crisis, where they were actually the greater and see, each of these countries, whether it's Japan, whether it's South Korea, whether it's the ASEAN countries, are increasingly dependent on China for trade and investment. So Chinese geo-economic clout has increased. This is the fundamental thing that one has to take into account. And whereas even within ASEAN, they split. Cambodia and Laos are increasingly going with greater Chinese involvement. Brunei, and for that matter, Philippines, Duterte has done a flip. They are increasingly openly, enthusiastically supporting greater American and British involvement over here. And along with this, Indonesia, Malaysia, they are showing, they have protested the Australians, but they're okay with the final security provider, which is the United States of America. Vietnam is also quietly welcoming this, but they have greater ties with the Chinese. Along with this, the French have left in a huff, but they're not going to go away. They have 2.2 million people within the Indo-Pacific region over the overseas territories. They have 7,000 soldiers over there. They have nuclear-powered submarines over there too. So, and what we saw in recent times is President Biden trying to reach out to the French, President Macron, and we will see greater French involvement over here. As for Great Britain moving away from European Union and striking its own deal, I think Great Britain became great because it acted on its own. And as a result, what has happened is it would not have formed a colonial empire if it had gone with continental Europe. It is time to find its own bearings. Again, that is for Great Britain to find out and history to actually say which way it goes. Coming over here, what will happen in recent times? Or we will increasingly see greater competition between US and China. Though we are talking about whether there'll be a conflict between Taiwan, but America has unofficially drawn a line in the sand. The Chinese are going to always use a salami slicing technique, and they try to impose pressure on them, but there will not be active confrontation. But there will always be a threat of war. But what is more likely is a sundering over of the global supply chain. Because already, along with the Blue Dot Network, what America is trying to come up with is a less dependent on China or Sino-centric supply chain is trying to move away from it. Increasingly, countries like India are also moving into that direction. While China is coming up with a less West-centric supply chain over here. That's why you will see technology war, you will see network war, you will see the incipient space war, you're seeing the vaccine war, you're seeing the digital electronic platform war, currency war. And along with this, just 2 minutes, and along with this is a future projection looking into the crystal ball. In recent times, what we will also see is the conflict about rollout of technology, 5G technology. That directly affects us. Bangladesh has indicated that it is going to go for 5G technology. But we know that there's grave Western reservations. But for us, in terms of a resource constraint, it is a matter of feasibility. That's number one. Number two, there's an imminent interest hike which is coming in the United States, which is going to impede global economic recovery. If the United States raises its interest, already we know inflation rates are going up. Fuel prices are going up all over. And there's Russia. We will not even bring that into. What will happen over there? The global economic recovery, whenever it is impeded, there'll be political instability across countries. China's Evergrande, $300 billion worth of real estate property going down under, And this is a signal that the Chinese economy is also under stress. The Chinese economy is under stress. The finance of BRI will be under a lot of stress. Bangladesh will be directly impacted. These are things that affects us more directly. And summing it up, historically, Bangladesh hasn't done well, or Bengal hasn't done well when it's taken sides in the clash of titans. The most recent example, which we forget because we are very Anglo-centric, is the Battle of Palasi, the first unofficial world war. It was a 7 years war between Great Britain and France, and with changing partners in the continent. But you had the French East India Company and the British East India Company fighting it out. And what happened? Bengal lost its independence. The last independent Nawab Sirajuddaulah strategic foresight did not take place. So we, as in Bangladesh, must be very careful. We already have our mini arms race with Myanmar. We have bought 2 submarines. They have got 2 submarines. What will happen over here? We are dealing with diesel class. But then again, these are things that we need to know about. And the last part is Bangladesh's strategic neutrality will be greatly impacted by whichever country or group of countries can help us to resolve the Rohingya issues in a peaceful and in a speedy manner. Thank you.